What is reading but just staring at pieces of dead trees for hours and hallucinating vividly, as one clever reader put it? In fiction, the descriptions writers bring to the page spur readers to feel the story in their hearts and guts as they conjure scenes in their mind's eye. Many writers dread writing descriptions. It's difficult to know what to include, and it requires a lot of mental energy to summon interesting details from one's imagination. Description can involve the setting, an object, a character, actions, and even internal thoughts. It might entail an artfully placed sentence dancing between dialogue, a paragraph that grounds the reader in the scene, or pages of prose that sink deep into a particular subject. I have 5 guiding principles for writing description. After touching on these basics, I'll cover more advanced strategies with in-depth examples. 1. Focus on details specific to the point of view. With descriptive writing, it's tempting to veer toward cliches because we don't have to think too hard. If a writer wants to show that a character is beautiful, they might rely on the familiar phrase, "She turned heads when she walked into a room." To make descriptions more memorable and engaging, be specific and go beyond the obvious. At art museums, men would find excuses to talk to her, trying to steal her attention from Monet. When it comes to rendering a scene, author David F. Schultz emphasizes the importance of knowing the story's narrative lens. This includes how the point of view character perceives the world and what they notice. He explains this idea in his article on the topic. How do you describe a werewolf is the wrong question. How does the protagonist see a werewolf is the question. The answer is, it depends on whether they are a werewolf hunter or someone trying to run away. Schultz provides an example written from the perspective of a werewolf hunter. She breathed in. The creature's musk was there, like a wet dog. The word creature and the detail comparing the werewolf to an animal inform the reader about the character's worldview. As a hunter, she doesn't have much empathy for werewolves. The details you choose spring from the story's perspective. 2. Include the senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. Sensory details add a visceral dimension to a scene, inspiring emotion from the reader. The most underutilized sense is smell, yet it's powerfully associated with strong memories, mood, and atmosphere. Say you want to create an atmosphere of coziness. What smells would you or your characters associate with feeling cozy? I'm imagining the warm scent of freshly baked gingerbread and a steaming cup of herbal tea. Conversely, what smells create an atmosphere of dread or unease? Rotting fruit comes to mind, decay with an undertone of sweetness. With sensory details, try to avoid generic descriptors. Everyone knows clouds are fluffy and the sun is bright. What's more important is conveying the senses in a way that's emotionally relevant to the character or scene. A sound that's normally comforting can be rendered terrifying, depending on the phrasing. It goes back to that concept of narrative lens, how the description fits in the larger context of the story. Compare these 2 examples. The call of the crows beckoned her home as she crossed the desert landscape, versus the cacophony of the crows assaulted her ears as she crossed the desert landscape. It's the same sound, yet it can feel positive or negative depending on what the character is doing. To expand your sensory memory, go out on an adventure somewhere and try to write down at least one instance of each of the senses. Practice paying attention to the world around you and describing it through emotionally engaging phrasing. 3. Favor strong verbs and adjectives. Your diction, your word choices, can do a lot of heavy lifting for you to express mood and tone. Verbs and adjectives feel strong when they evoke a feeling or give a new way of thinking about a subject. These words often activate other senses as well. Verbs like droned, sputtered, and screeched, for example, all relate to sound, and each one creates a slightly different effect in a sentence like, "The car droned or sputtered or screeched to a halt." Editors often recommend replacing the verb was with a stronger verb. Take this sentence. She was even more irritated because the afternoon heat was on her and her too frilly dress was sticking to her skin. All the verbs here are was. What if we chose more interesting verbs instead to add voice and emotion? The sentence might sound like this. Her irritation only festered as the afternoon heat bore down, and her too frilly dress shrink-wrapped her skin. The verb festered, meaning to become rotten, has strong negative connotations, matching the character's irritation. Shrink-wrapped also features a passive-aggressive tone, underscoring her discomfort, and it implies a texture. These small changes give readers more information and create a stronger sense of voice and fewer words. Don't replace was in every instance. But if you want to spice up a descriptive moment, replacing was is one easy way to do it. This includes descriptive sentences that begin with "there was," which you can often recast to put the subject at the beginning, accompanied by a stronger verb. "There was a house sitting on the hill" could become "a house sat on the hill." I often collect interesting nouns, adjectives, and verbs I encounter while reading, and put them in a word bank to sneak into my own writing later. These are usually words I already know but forget to use. Reading poetry has helped me expand my vocabulary and inspire fresh ways of seeing the world. The thesaurus is also your friend when you're writing descriptions, but try to sprinkle interesting words throughout the story rather than stuffing them all into a single sentence or paragraph. Juxtapose simple sentences with complex ones so you have variety. In addition to the line-level prose, you want to consider the purpose of description in a scene, which leads us to the next point. 4. Move the narrative forward. Good description advances the story. It relates to whatever the character is doing or thinking in the scene. If the protagonist is climbing a tree, it's natural for them to describe those sensations, the roughness of the bark, the way the light filters through the leaves above them. They're physically interacting with the subject you're describing. If you need a scene to go from point A to point B, make it interesting to yourself in terms of content or language, and that will in turn make it feel interesting to the reader. For example, I could write, "When the garage door opened, she was standing on the other side." But say I wanted to add a little more suspense and hint at how the point of view character feels about the she standing on the other side. I might tease out the details. The garage door creaked open, revealing a pair of bubblegum pink shoes, pale legs dotted with bruises. Then the metal curtain rose higher, and her smile shone back at him, her face aglow with freckles. Description can be a form of characterization. It feels most natural to illustrate someone's appearance when the protagonist meets them for the first time, or notices something has changed about them. For instance, if their mother's normally meticulous blonde hair is disheveled, that tells us about her emotional state, in addition to her appearance. Description is about conveying a feeling as much as it is about providing imagery. When the character is describing themselves, you can connect it to how they feel about those physical details in that moment. Isabel Allende uses a character's discomfort to drop details about her outfit in The House of the Spirits.
A bone in Nivea's corset snapped, and the point jabbed her in the ribs. She felt she was choking in her blue velvet dress, with its high lace collar, its narrow sleeves, and a waist so tight that when she removed her belt, her stomach jumped and twisted for half an hour while her organs fell back in place.
5. Don't describe everything. Flowery, long descriptions aren't better than short to-the-point descriptions or vice versa. Both are valid styles that serve different stories and reader preferences. Use a descriptive style that fits with the character's perspective, the overall tone of the story, and the type of scene you're writing. Your character probably wouldn't wax poetic about the ocean while they're drowning, unless that's an intentional contrast you're using to communicate the ocean's power and mystique. The job of the author is not just to describe a scene or show us what's there, but to contextualize it for the reader, to show us what matters. That's what narrative is, after all, the ordering of detail into meaning. An author should remember that when they're choosing what to describe or not, as well as the way they describe things. Now I want to go beyond these common tips and explore specific writing strategies in practice. I've gathered advice from a variety of writers so you can see how many different methods there are of approaching description. This way you get to glimpse their actual thought process while drafting. I've asked each of them to share a snippet of description from their own work, alongside an example from a book they admire. I want you to notice how their influences shape their writing. Writers who struggle with visualizing scenes should listen to author Sarah L. Hawthorn's advice and add a character-based layer. Sarah notes that her aphantasia makes it difficult to mentally picture scenes, although she uses Pinterest photos as writing inspiration. When you're navigating through a scene, try focusing more on the character's emotions, rather than just the setting details. Sarah comments, "Your mileage may vary, but generally I get bored by a wall of description unless it's super critical to the story. It's much nicer to read a little peppering of description that connects me to the character or place emotionally. So I think the most important thing about description is just making sure that it adds to the vibe of the world, or the character's way of taking in the world. And don't be afraid of adding a note to self to insert something later if it's really bogging you down in the first draft. Take a big lens on it and ask yourself, what is really important here for a reader to come away with?" Here's an excerpt from a draft of Sarah's Gothic work in progress, The Drowned Coast, read by the author.
I cut the cod downwards, behind the head and near the gills to create a space in the cavity. I run the blade down the back in shallow sections until the tail becomes thin enough to slice end to end. A sharp knife makes all the difference between a quick, clean cut and a massacre of choppy, gut-covered bits. Cod is not an easy fish to fillet. Smaller fish, like pollock or mackerel, can be opened with one quick swipe of the blade down the backbone. Cod requires patience. "You've gotten better at that cut since you did it to me," says the man I murdered last year from across the kitchen. I am thankful for the nets that caught the cod. It will feed my sister and me much longer than the tiny perch that they usually dredge up. I am not thankful for the lighthouse keeper's persistent presence.
I admire how Sarah seamlessly blends descriptive action and dialogue in this scene. The character's voice comes through in phrases like, "a massacre of choppy gut-covered bits." Even the description of the character's internal thoughts adds a visual, with the idea of nets catching the cod and the tiny perch, and those thoughts add the emotional character-based layer in describing the scene. Sarah's chosen excerpt from a book she admires comes from Jeff Vandermeer's eco-horror novel Annihilation.
Far worse, though, was a low, powerful moaning at dusk. The wind off the sea and the odd interior stillness dulled our ability to gauge direction, so that the sound seemed to infiltrate the black water that soaked the cypress trees. This water was so dark we could see our faces in it, and it never stirred, set like glass, reflecting the beards of gray moss that smothered the cypress trees. If you looked out through these areas toward the ocean, all you saw was the black water, the gray of the cypress trunks, and the constant, motionless rain of moss flowing down. All you heard was the low moaning. The effect of this cannot be understood without being there. The beauty of it cannot be understood either, and when you see beauty in desolation, it changes something inside you. Desolation tries to colonize you.
What words or details stick out to you in this passage? I'm drawn toward the cypress trees and the gray moss as specific visuals. I also notice the intentional repetition of beauty and desolation. Ordinarily, we wouldn't think of desolation as beautiful, but that contradiction is compelling because it invites the reader to examine the description more closely. There are also a number of strong verb choices: dulled, infiltrate, smothered, colonize. Sarah notes that this passage sunk its teeth into her brain because the descriptive work becomes part of the character and setting. It feels dense in the best kind of way, like a rich chocolate cake. Author Joe Butler takes a cinematographer's approach by imagining the scene from a fixed point. He says, "I find I have a very visual and oral imagination, so when I'm writing, it feels filmic in my mind's eye. I imagine the scene from a fixed point and describe what I see from that point within the space. I try to approach that with a minimalistic angle, only pointing out the details that have real meaning and help capture the feeling of the space. This descriptive passage comes from Joe's dystopian short story, A Small Life, which was published in Bandit Fiction, read by the author.
From the small porthole window in the bathroom, he observes the dark shape of the city abutting the sky. The neat, angular lines of the brutalist tower blocks that spread along the horizon resemble a sine wave. They eat up the colour of the horizon, pixelating the dawn, making it look like a corrupted digital image. Birds circle the towers, gulls mainly, even though the sea is miles from here. He cranes his neck in the small window space, toothpaste dripping from his chin, and tries to see past the perimeter of the city, but there's too much pollution.
There's an inherent sense of conflict here in the description of the setting. It's implied that this is a sterile, machine-driven place, with the brutalist tower, the sine wave horizon, the sky that resembles a corrupted digital image, and the pollution clouding the view. The fixed point of the window limits what the character can see, even when he tries to crane his neck to see more. Joe's novel to be admired is The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
He got up and walked out to the road, the black shape of it running from dark to dark. Then a distant low rumble, not thunder, you could feel it under your feet, a sound without cognate, and so without description, something imponderable shifting out there in the dark, the earth itself contracting with the cold. It did not come again. What time of year? What age the child? He walked out into the road and stood. The silence, the saliter drying from the earth, the mud-stained shapes of flooded cities burned to the waterline. At a crossroads, a ground set with dolmen stones where the spoken bones of oracles lay mouldering. No sound but the wind.
The fixed point in this scene is the man walking out to the road, and the description repeatedly circles back to the sounds, or lack of sound. McCarthy's style demonstrates how sentence-level rhythm contributes to the way the reader experiences the description. Here, the short sentences and fragments create a staccato effect. Each sentence is like a sharp punch that adds to the harshness of the landscape. He breaks up the staccato rhythm toward the end of the passage with a longer piece of description. To Joe, all of McCarthy's work is beautiful, dark, and layered with incidental exposition. Joe notes how the idea of the dolmen stones, purposefully laid out, indicates that someone was there. People use these stones to communicate directions, maybe, although it's not confirmed, nor is it important. It's just there, and it lends the scene a huge sense of atmosphere. Similarly, the way McCarthy mentions the indescribable noise within the earth, as if contracting with the cold, conjures a picture without giving too much. Joe says that the magic in McCarthy's prose is that he articulates images in such a unique and beautifully dense but metaphorical way, evoking an atmosphere in a way no other author can. Another approach comes from Mia V. Moss, a science fiction and fantasy author who tries to permeate the scene with a specific emotion. She shares, "My way of describing is to first start with how I want the scene to feel. Expansive with a sense of wonder, intimate, claustrophobic, comforting and familiar. Once I know what sort of emotion I want to evoke for the characters, I then pick and choose a few set pieces. In a scene in my fantasy novel where two characters have been kidnapped and have to escape by jumping off of a flying airship into a pink hot springs below, I go very wide and describe the setting in a swift, fearful way. The sting of the wind whipping the character's hair and her eyes, the way the lake feels so far away but rises up so fast to meet them when they jump. The absolute hushed silence of a forest covered in 2 feet of snow around them, the drip of it into the edges of the lake where the warm water is melting it. Creaky boughs laden with ice and snow as they hold their breath and strain in the shivering cold to hear if the airship is turning around to come catch them. In that scene, I had to choose from a million little things, and it took me a while to whittle it down, but I ended up going with a focus on the snow and the silence, because the point of view character is in a primal, terrified, hyper-vigilant state of mind, and she's not thinking of anything else except listening for the airship and not dying of exposure. This excerpt from Mia's sci-fi noir novella, My Ties for the Lost, published by Underland Press, captures the chaotic atmosphere of a party scene.
Coco tugged at my hand, drawing me away from the image and further into the house. Crystal chandeliers cast splintered fragments of pink light across a menagerie of furnishings and heirloom rugs, some in fabrics you could no longer manufacture. Guests sprawled, gathered, danced, prowled, and pawed amongst themselves in each room we passed. The library, lined floor to ceiling and wall to wall with real paper books, had been rather cavalierly converted into the bar for the evening. A lithe, heavily tattooed boy stood behind a heavy table in a cloud of sandalwood-scented smoke and strained color-changing cocktails into coupe glasses. Coco and I skipped those temptations and slipped through the thick maze of limbs and conversation towards our destination, the changing rooms at the end of the main hall. Because, of course, everything up to that point was just the mood setter. The true clambake was outside, beyond the safety features of the hab.
The flurry of details reflects the characters' experience of being amazed and overwhelmed as they navigate this flashy party. Certain details suggest what things no longer exist in this futuristic setting. There are fabrics you could no longer manufacture, and real paper books. These objects have become status symbols of wealth and luxury in the story world. In addition, the characters aren't static in this scene. They're literally moving across the room with a clear objective and destination. The story is still moving forward rather than grinding to a halt to describe the scene. One of Mia's favorite descriptive passages comes from The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin.
That night as I slept, I dreamt of him. It is an ugly storm cloud-choked night. Above the clouds, the sky is lightening with the approach of dawn. Below the clouds, this has made absolutely no difference in the battlefield's illumination. 1,000 torches burning amid 100,000 soldiers are more than enough light. The capital, too, is a gentle radiance nearby. It is not the sky that I know. This city sprawls across a floodplain rather than over a hill, and the palace is embedded at its heart, not hovering overhead. I am not me. A respectable force, says Jaka beside me. Jakarn I know now, goddess of battle and bloodshed. In place of her usual headscarf is a helm that fits her head almost as closely. She wears shining silver armor, its surface a glory of engraved sigils and incomprehensible designs that glow red as if hot.
Mia said this passage stood out to her because it begins with the sky and then pans down to a battle below and the city beyond. The scene then narrows down to the character level, describing Zaka's armor. The primary emotion is dreamlike, epic, and a little disorienting, which makes sense given the scene is an actual dreamscape. It shares a similar type of movement to Mia's scene, where we see the character's attention travel from one part of the setting to another, with a specific goal in mind. In Jemisin's scene, we know the dream scene will eventually move toward the hymn mentioned in the opening line, so all the description before that point is setting the stage for that objective. Author Alex Laurel LANZ focuses on that connection between environment and description. She lays out a theory for how to make description feel organic to the scene. When I think of description, I think of it less as describing what things look like, and more like how the physical presence interacts with the environment. This means pairing descriptions with actions, or even reflecting on how different aspects of the scene, lighting, air, etc., impact each other. I could describe someone as tall, but I'd rather think of them as looming, or how their shadow casts longer than everyone else's, or how the book they're holding looks small in their hands. This also gives me an excuse to keep moving the scene forward. Alex shared an excerpt from a psychological horror story, Every Little Hair on Your Head, published by Scare Street, where she not only has to keep things moving, but also has to ensure she's creating tension with her description.
The broken vent in the dressing room hissed like a death rattle. Mara adjusted the pins holding the golden wig in place. The yellow shine clashed against her tan skin. That seeing hair spill over her shoulders for once made her feel normal. You're going to go bald.
Who wants to watch a bald person dance?
The old shrill voice of her mother rang in her head. She flinched at the uninvited thoughts. How she would scold her for pulling out all her beautiful hair. Despite all the warnings of scars and baldness, that relief was too sweet. That sweetness had beckoned her since she was a child. The stage was empty, a single light shining down from above. Benji was probably around somewhere making arrangements. Hopefully Deb wasn't. Mara clicked the play button on the vintage stereo, and music thumped from its speakers.
In a small space, Alex covers a lot of ground, and I was fascinated by her thought process in choosing which details to include. She says, "This is a scene where I have to describe both the new set, an empty stage, as well as the costume the main character is wearing, all while slipping information in to keep the story moving. I try to set the atmosphere first with the way the place feels, by describing the vents, but then move to describing what is unusual about the main character, her wig, which allows me to further delve into her character. I flesh out the scene around her by having Mara interact with and react to her environment. By creating a daisy chain of events, I'm trying to make sure none of the description slows down the character development or story development. When making your descriptions dynamic, think of how you can pair it with the character's external actions or internal choices. Stephen Graham Jones does this in his novel My Heart is a Chainsaw, which Alex selected as an author she admires.
"You good there?" Mismatched Gloves asks, and Jade looks down to where he means, the red blooming slow in the left pocket of her coveralls, from when she was flicking the utility knife's razor blade open and shut against her leg on the walk here. "Got some red on me, yeah," she kind of quotes, shrugging his inspection off. All the tiny scars up and down her thighs and hips crawling over themselves to be seen.
The description of the character's scars is delivered alongside her shrugging during a conversation. Jones also personifies these scars, almost giving them agency in how they crawl over themselves to be seen. That detail adds to the visual and to the novel's unsettling atmosphere. When I asked Alex why this snippet works for her as a reader, she commented, "What makes Jones's description great is that he doesn't stop the show to illustrate something, and has a great sense of giving things a physical presence, rather than just describing them. The blood in that excerpt becomes its own entity with physical space. But he also uses this as a way to sneak in more details about the scene, such as providing context for what the character was doing leading up to this moment. His word choices are unique, adding a lot of poetic flair to his horror." Author LYLE ENRIGHT has advice specifically for crafting similes and metaphors that stem from the world or character. As a quick reminder, both similes and metaphors are forms of figurative language, comparisons between two ideas that help the reader better understand what you're describing. Similes use like or as. At any given moment, you could spot him in his field, bent at the waist, back as curved as the scythe he swung all day. That's from Khaled Hosseini's And the Mountains Echoed. Metaphors are a literal comparison, where two things are presented as being identical. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players, from Shakespeare's As You Like It. LYLE recommends drawing inspiration from what's unique in the story's setting, to craft similes and metaphors the character would naturally use. Good similes and prose help build the world, while excellent metaphors create an emotional connection with the reader. Hosseini's simile suggests that the character, with his curved back, is an older, experienced farmer. Shakespeare's metaphor conveys a philosophy about the universal human experience. In a scene from Taverner, his fantasy work in progress, LYLE uses figurative language that subtly draws on the novel's setting, as read by the author.
I patted my way through half a dozen empty pockets before I found what I was looking for. I ripped the patch open and palmed the contents, a silver coin with a big wedge cut into it, like it had stopped an axe blow. Silver in hand, I eat the coin onto my thumb and gave it a good flick. I couldn't see it, but I heard the pleasant ring as it lifted off and into the air. As it reached its zenith somewhere near the top of the cave, it sparked like a piece of flint and came alive with white light. It dropped gently back into my waiting palm, and I smiled. I was a bag of stupid tricks, but little things like this still made me feel like a hero sometimes.
The similes here include like it'd stop an axe blow and sparked like a piece of flint. Axes and flint are both details drawn from the story's fantasy world. It feels natural for a first-person narrator to use similes and metaphors that relate to his personal experience. In a similar fashion, a character who's an expert on birds might use bird-related metaphors and talk about how a greedy man's eye twinkles like a magpie's when he sees a collection of gemstones. The character's lens for seeing the world colors how they describe it. Lyle's chosen excerpt comes from the high fantasy novel The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch.
The thief-maker's wards all carried candles. Their cold blue light shone through the silver curtains of river mist as street lamps might glimmer through a smoke-grimed window. A chain of ghost light wound its way down from the hilltop, through the stone markers and ceremonial paths, down to the wide glass bridge over the coal-smoke canal, half visible in the blood-warm fog that seeps up from Comor's wet bones on summer nights.
Lyle explains why this passage works for him. The simile here, as street lamps, compares the shine of the candles not only to something common in the world, but to something that probably is part of the scene. Lynch populates the scenery through comparison and allusion instead of direct presentation. The metaphor about Comor's wet bones interrupts the scene, since cities don't have bones, but it also enriches the scene by adding something to it, implying that the city is alive. Good metaphors enrich the scene by adding to it from a slanted or outside perspective. As a writing exercise, think of a point of view character from any of your stories. Now list 3 places that character might go. A friend's house, a coffee shop, a hidden cave. Choose one of those 3 settings. Next, identify one word that describes the atmosphere, or how the character feels in that moment about that place. You're going to filter the descriptions through that emotion. Say the character is annoyed and they don't even want to go to that place. All the sights, sounds, and smells of the scene might get on their nerves. With a place and emotion in mind, give the character a goal for the scene. What's their reason for being there? To meet someone? To buy something? To escape? Make that goal clear at the beginning of the scene. Then have the character move through the scene and show what they notice about the things and people around them. Include these 3 details. A surprising smell. An object that the character interacts with, they touch it or move it. A simile or metaphor derived from the character's background. For instance, they might say, "The place stunk worse than Grandma's famed broccoli and garlic soup." If you get stuck, try a different setting from your list. Have fun and use this as an opportunity to experiment and come up with weird descriptions you wouldn't write otherwise. All of the writers I featured in this video are part of TLDR Press, or TLDR Press, a small nonprofit that publishes anthologies of short stories and poems. All proceeds from these anthologies go toward different charities. They also host an annual flash fiction contest and provide feedback to every writer. I've linked their published novels and stories in the video description. My short story, Cream of You, was published in the Nope Horror Anthology, benefiting the Pilcrow Foundation to provide children's books to rural communities. Check out the TLDR Press website for upcoming submission opportunities and writing contest. What's your approach to writing description? I'd love to hear how your brain works in the comments. Whatever you do, keep writing.